Hi, my name's Ricky Drever. I'm a first year War Studies and History student from King's College London, and this is my podcast to accompany my article for Arts and Refugees. And the article is called Peace on Paper: The Daily Fight for Survival in Libya. So, this is, of course, written as part of a micro internship. I was really drawn to this opportunity specifically because it's about post-conflict societies and it's very from a human perspective from below. Like whilst it is very important to, of course, study things like IR theory and paradigms and international law frameworks and whatnot, but I still think there's like one of the most essential parts of studying conflict, studying war, is definitely the like from below perspective, like the human experience of it. So I like this really drew me to this to do this whole internship to be able to like fully engage with it and fully break down just what's actually happening on the ground, like how people actually like experience it. So the reason I chose Libya specifically as well is specifically looking at also what happens after intervention compared to other civil wars, specifically with Libya. I mean, there's often this idea that after intervention that everything's sorted out and then whatever, and then it's be wrapped up and moved on. But that hasn't been the case for Libya. After intervention in 2011, they've still haven't recovered from it. They're arguably in a much worse position than they would have been. And so it's very like, what actually is that daily experience? Like, what actually happens afterwards? Like, that isn't just the full story. So, like, doing this article and like researching it has allowed me to like dive deeper into it. So but this podcast will just go over like the daily fight for survival Libyans have to experience, specifically from a safety and security perspective. So I guess it's very important to start off with some context. So Libya has been in a state of turmoil since 2011, off since when the Gaddafi dictatorship was removed by international forces. And since I mean the promise was is that now that the dictator has been removed, they'll be able to rebuild and revolt into a democracy, but that hasn't fully been the case. Since around they've been plunged into civil war since 2014, and since 2011, two rival factions have risen up, which is the Government of National Accord based in the capital Tripoli in the west, and the House of Representatives based in Tobruk in the east. So they've been at civil war from each other from 2014 to official civil war from 2014 to 2016. But then eventually a ceasefire was signed on the 23rd of October 2020, which promised a return to democracy with an interim government put in place with promised elections in December 2021. There was really, really high hopes for this, with people such as Stephanie Williams, the acting special representative of the Secretary General, saying that I hope that this agreement will continue to ending the suffering of the Libyan people and enabling the displaced, both outside and inside the country, to return to their homes and live in peace and security. This has sadly not been the case. The promised 21 elections never took place. The interim government overstayed their mandate and they refused to allow their position to be changed, which then reignited tensions between the East and the West divisions, who both who both viewed themselves as deserving of that power instead. So this, after even less than 1 year, the tensions had already been restarted and conflict has already returned to Libya. I mean, going against all the hopes of people such as the UN, and so it is just very like to from our perspective, I guess. I mean, from a very Western perspective, I guess, and from a maybe legal perspective, Libya should still be in agreement should be signed, and there shouldn't be any form of conflict. But sadly, that hasn't been the case. The East and the West are at war with each other again, and that in turn has really caught the Libyan people stuck in the crossfire again, and then they have to, even though they were promised, I mean, even though they were promised safety, they now again have to worry about if they will be able to survive the next day, if they're able to see their family tomorrow or whatnot, if their family on the other side of the country will survive, which is really harrowing and distraughting. So, going specific, the division has made it very difficult to live in Libya, of course. The main part being it does put of course, it puts people in danger. You could always be accidentally involved in the conflict. A very harrowing and depressing example of this, of course, is the Tripoli clashes in May 2025, which is May 2025, which is yeah, a year less than a year ago, where after the death of a military leader called, pardon my pronunciation, Abdul Kilikli, they were the Tripoli capital was overran with both groups gaining like out stronghold, I guess, across it. Dr. Mustafa Fattori, a Tripoli native, writes that residents live under the constant threat of sudden brutal clashes that have become part of their daily routine for years now. The sprawling capital stands precariously on the edge of renewed violence. So the experience has been very horrific. Many residents have come forward describing hearing heavy gunfire across the streets around their neighborhoods, with other people saying they see flashing red lights in the sky. Like they're Tripoli is a very populated neighborhood. So of course, like thousands of people are worried about if they will able to survive the next day. Of course, sadly, there has some innocent residents have lost their lives, including brothers Salim and Nagib al-Tajouri, who were killed after a shell had hit their house. There was also another unnamed 21-year-old woman who was killed after a shell hit a family house. This is particularly upsetting as she was the only female child in the house, and she was due to be married in the next month or so. And now she will never get to experience that, and her family have to now live with this looming idea that their potentially precious daughter will never be able to like fulfill her dreams and carry on with her lives, which is it's very upsetting. It's very sad to talk about, and it's very dark to even fathom it. Like the situation in Tripoli became so intense that the government forced the lockdown to make sure that residents wouldn't escape, wouldn't had to stay at home. Which just shows how intense the conflict actually was. The division only doesn't impact extra conflict, but makes it very difficult for the government to actually carry out proper ruling and actually encourage the developments and refurbishments that's needed in Libya since 2011, with this ultimately culminating in the Derna floods in 2023. So in September 2023, Storm Daniel crossed the Mediterranean and wreaked havoc on the coastal city of Derna, which is it's a horrific event already, but that only got exacerbated further due to the damage due to the flooding caused by dams in Derna, which after the first day caused the death of 2,000 and a further 5,000 people to go missing on the very first day. By the end of it, it's been guessed that around 20,000 people may have been injured, perished, or potentially died, which is very horrific. Bodies are still found to this day. The exact number isn't known, which is of course a horrible thing to even think about. But the even though it does sound like an environmental problem, the dams were constantly scheduled for refurbishment. They were made in the 1970s, and it had cracks throughout the entire thing. It had cracks around the entire basin of it, and everyone knew that if something was to happen to the dams, there was very little can be done. It had been on the government agenda for a bit, but due to the constant rivalry and division, it never got the refurbishment it needed, and now tens of thousands of people are dead, which is absolutely horrific. And it just goes to show that even in Libya, in places that have little to no conflict, they still have to worry about their safety and their security, which is just blatantly unfair. I think it's best to move on now to the groups that have become even more vulnerable, sadly, due to this failed ceasefire. So, like again, going back to this lack of government control, there's been high amounts of sex trafficking in Libya, but the main victim have been people who have migrated and escaped from other countries, such as South Sudan, or people who are planning to get to Europe through Libya. But they came to Libya due to the ceasefire, due to that promise that it was now safe and they will be able to escape their war-torn country and potentially start a new life. But now they are now being stuck in Libya. They don't have to experience the same experience the same struggles that the Libyan peoples are currently going through as well. For instance, which was through things like sex trafficking and like being subject to high amounts of abuse. For instance, a Kenyan national that had escaped his country looking for better opportunities in Libya described his experience. He was labeled, I mean, to keep anonymity, he was labeled by Human Rights Watch as George, but he said that when he was captured for sex trafficking, they would call our families using different telephone numbers, asking them for money. There was a boy who rebelled. He was beaten and killed. We were told we would be beaten until our people paid the ransom. If they didn't, they would kill us, abandon us, or throw us into the desert. So just these people came to Libya hoping to start fresh, thinking that it was now safe, which is sadly not being the case. Um, Sadly, of course, like going back to carry on the sex trafficking narrative, women and young girls have been have been subject to this. They have been most, there've been a dramatic rise in sexual related crimes in Libya, which is horrible. But then there's also been a rise in femicide, which is specifically the killing of women because of their gender, with the deaths of Kansa al-Mujahid, Amani Haja, and another identified woman happening in very quick succession within the space of 1 week, just because of their gender. But then again, the division, the rival factions, and the lack of government control means nothing can be done for this. And it's just, that is the conditions that Libyans have to go through right now. And it's yeah, it's a very difficult thing to go through. It's very horrible. So I guess just to conclude, my points is that the ceasefire in 2020 was supposed to make Libya safer and ensure the safety or security of everyone who resides in the country. It has failed to do that as citizens again find themselves at the mercy of conflict. While residents die in Tripoli due to aimless shells, residents in Derna find themselves at risk of being drowned. Migrants find themselves at risk of being trafficked, whilst women find themselves increasingly susceptible to sexual crimes. The agreement has done very little, and going back to my title, peace was nothing more than a promise on paper. It is a very upsetting and depressing experience what's happening in Libya right now, but that is the case, and even after agreements have been signed, very little has actually changed. Thank you for listening to this podcast.